Open one more beer for me, please, so I can put it beside me.
You'll be nervous.
Thank you. No, not at all. I just want to drink my beer.
Are you nervous about getting on here?
No, not at all.
Good.
It's a nice beer.
Thank you. I enjoy it.
You did make it go public, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna pull it up.
Usually
You'll have
takes
to
people a minute.
open
There's somebody. Hello, hello.
You have to open it.
Oh, it's
Oh, there you go.
Oh, I love hearing myself.
don't kick over my wine, okay?
Why don't you fill it up a little more?
I'm good.
Okay. Hello, everybody.
Jacob, do you want to sit like
What? I'm in the frame, right?
you're kind of in
Partially.
the frame?
I'll just lean to the side here.
That's comfortable.
All right. So
How many do we have here?
we have. It says one person, that about 20 people have commented already. So that's inaccurate.
Looks like it's
70.
Hi everybody. How's everybody tonight? Is the comment feature off on that or something?
I don't know. Is there no comments popping up?
No comments on it. It doesn't matter. I can't see it from here anyway. Can you, Greg? Can anybody?
Live chat. Okay. It was turned off for some reason. Sorry about that.
Can you see that? It's just me.
And so I'm going to have to get glasses for distance. Yeah, for some reason the chat's not popping up on here, but it is popping up on my phone.
That's fine.
Okay. I'll read the, I'll keep the chat monitored.
Who's here?
We got about 100 people.
Gail here?
Gail is here, even though she said she wouldn't be. So
Hey, Gail. Gail's our friend from England.
England.
I'm gonna wait until we get a few more people and then I'll introduce. Somebody's lurking. And I'm just gonna.
Is it connected to the house Wi-Fi, or is it going on the phone?
I have no idea. It shouldn't be connected to Wi-Fi because I usually don't use it.
Is the signal good for everyone?
If we introduce too early, it'll just be like saying it 10 times.
People show up late. They're like, yeah, they just
Wait,
want.
who's this?
They yeah. So you need to kind of. All right.
I think so.
Is it a
I think
street
we're having a
dance?
good time over there.
If it's a street dance, it's indigenous.
It is. It is indigenous. Can everybody hear the background of the street festival that's going on in our town?
All right, we got 133 people. 133. Why don't you introduce our guest, Christy?
All right. So hi everybody and welcome back. This is Greg from Where Shadows Walk, and he has his own tour company. He is an author, and shoot, I forgot to bring the book out here.
Did we go get it?
Yeah, go get it so we can show everybody. But he's here tonight, and we're going to give him a chance to maybe tell a story or kind of talk about some experiences he's had. And at the end of the show, we will give a chance for people to call in and ask questions to Greg. We're not going to be taking calls about other people's stories, but maybe if you have a question or you want to pick his brain, let us know. And we will link all of his social media in our YouTube later on, whenever we have a chance to edit all that stuff. So, and this is his beautiful wife, Pauletta, but she is not on screen, so we'll have her come over here. Hi, Pauletta. She doesn't want to be really on it, but that's okay. So yeah, here is the book. This is called, and this will be backwards because we're mirroring. It's called Ghost Country, and it is by Greg Clark. And as you can see on the cover, this is a lovely old church in Franklin, North Carolina called Snow Hill.
No, it's
or
Pleasant Hill.
Pleasant Hill.
Snow Hill
It
Road,
is
I
on
think,
Snow
is on
Hill
the way.
Road, right? And I have lots of pictures of this church. This is where I used to go to kind of hang out and decompress. We had a geocache at this beautiful
It's still there.
church, which is apparently still there according to the Carpetbagger here. And we also took a lot of pictures of our kids at this place. It was just a picturesque, like, little knoll, and it's just beautiful and quiet and something that I loved. So hopefully you guys will get a chance to check out this book.
Tell about who took the picture.
Who did take the picture?
Girl, you don't know who took the picture?
I don't know who took the picture. Let's hear it.
The still shot photographer of The Walking Dead. There's only
Really?
Yeah. There's only one still shot photographer for The Walking Dead.
Really?
He's also the #1 still shot photographer for all of the Hollywood horror films, Jeepers Creepers 1 and 2, and he just finished up with the Rob Zombie film. I don't remember the title, but it's, it was awful.
So cool. How
mean,
did you meet him?
It was awful in a good way.
Yeah.
It's like, he called us up about 3 years ago, saw us online. His son was going to the university over in Cullowhee, across the mountain, and he wanted to do a walk with us. He became a family friend, and he's walked with us multiple times. We've had dinner with him in different restaurants, so on and so forth. Super guy. And so he wanted to shoot the cover for the book, and then after he shot the cover for the book and the author picture, he sent us, he emailed and said, well, you know what, several years ago, I went into an old home and an old asylum and so on and so forth, and I shot a bunch of pictures just for myself. And he says, do you want those? And so we ended up peppering the book with those Gene
pictures.
Page
People
photos
were-
as well.
Awesome.
People were asking if they wish to purchase the book, where they could go to find
It's on
it.
Amazon everywhere.
Amazon.
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, that's Ghost Country by Greg Clark.
With some cool
You see?
pictures by Gene Page.
And awesome pictures by Gene Page of The Walking Dead. Still photography. I am now calling Destiny Davidson. Sorry about that.
Oh, does she love Walking Dead?
No. It was an accidental.
Oh, you're actually calling somebody?
Yeah. I just
Don't do that.
butt dialed
We had
on
our
a live
first-
stream.
We have a first caller, and it's Christy's supervisor from work, apparently.
Whoops. Whoopsie. She would not be happy to hear from me on a Saturday night, I don't think. So
Greg Clark.
yeah. Tonight, I always talk about what I'm drinking. Tonight, I am drinking Kendall Jackson Chardonnay. There is also Fat Tire
I'm
right
drinking,
here for Greg.
and I'm drinking RC Cola.
Jacob's drinking RC Cola.
I didn't know they made RC Cola anymore. I looked for that the other day, actually.
You gotta get RC and a moon
I
pie.
did, actually. I looked
think
for it
we
and
might
I couldn't find it.
You might want to mention Greg has 2 G's.
Oh yes, Greg has
Greg
two
has
G's.
2 G's if you have trouble finding him.
And there's no I in there either, so please.
And oh yeah, that
For
one
some
guy.
people,
Some people
but-
Greig. Greg.
Yes, which that's just confusing. But then I shouldn't talk because of the way mine's spelled. So tell us about some of the other stuff that you guys do, Greg. I know that you have the walking tours, but I know you also do some mystery dinners and things like that. So talk about that a little bit.
All right, starting seven years ago, my lovely wife here, she said, we need to do something with the history and the ghosts of the region, and specifically Franklin, North Carolina, our little small hometown. And I listened to her, and I researched, and I dug, and I already had a background in history. I was teaching English and history at the 8th grade level, and we put it together, and I thought we will get, this first weekend I was so nervous, and I thought we'll get 5 or 6 friends for a one-night walk, and that'll be it, and it'll be a joke, and people will talk about it for years to come. Remember when you did the ghost walk thing?
That was
But
great.
7 years ago, we have about 15 people on the tour tonight. We're not walking the tour, but we have a tour guide walking it tonight. We have people every weekend. When we offer weeknight tours, we fill up for that as well. But the history of the Great Smoky Mountain region and Western North Carolina region is so intense, so dark, so grisly, so bloody, that we were able to not create one tour, but multiple tours. So we have the Woodlawn Cemetery tour. We have the Coffins and Corn Whiskey tour. We have the Ghosts and Graveyards tour. We have the Haunted Homes tour. Missing one, I think. And my wife, after about 6 years of the tours, decided, what would be fun to add would be murder mystery dinners. So she started creating her own murder mystery dinners. These are not prepackaged. These don't come in a box. She doesn't pull this. and she creates her own murder mystery dinners. She invites about 25 people per, and there are no actors. The guests are the actors. They are the ones who have killed or have suspicions of the murderer, or who may be the victim themselves.
So you can just show up and you might be the murderer?
You might be a murderer that night.
Well, you don't show up. You do have to.
You do. You do have to book. You have to reserve ahead of time. but yes. And so about 25 people per time. There, now you're on another. Look, there you are.
And we do those at Rock and Roly Polies on Main Street, Franklin. He does the food, and we do the parties. We have a lot of fun. Lots of fun characters. We've met a lot of great people. And you come dressed as a character. You receive an invitation in the mail with your character and the description. They're themed, how you should dress. And so we have a lot of fun.
And she makes her own invitations, guys. Not only that, but she does private parties. So in case anybody's interested, whereshadowswalk.com.
Absolutely. The private parties are fantastic. She'll go out and do a private party for you. And then, of course, we do the books. So we have Ghost Country Volume 1 out there, and we have another book coming out in the spring, which is a novel. And this is 3 Days in 63. This is the unvarnished true story of the cold case of Francis Bullock from July 26, 1963, one of the oldest and coldest cases in North Carolina history. And also on the back burner, but coming up soon, will be a book of teen campfire ghost stories, all true stories from the region, called Whispers in the Night. That's coming out. And Ghost Country Volume 2 as well.
Fun. So I'm curious, do you pick the brains of your students for those teenage ghost stories? Do you have any inspiration at school?
Funny story, because absolutely. 2 years ago, like I said, I teach 8th grade English and history, and so I read to my children ghost stories that I write. We analyze them, we go over them, we pick them apart, we fix them, so on and so forth. And I had a student, I was just about to publish the book. It wasn't even, it hadn't gone to publication yet. And I had a teenage boy, one of my football players. He says, "Mr. Clark," he says, "your ending to this story is not so good." Now, nothing offends me. Now, I'm not like, I'm like, really? What's wrong with it, And he says, "Well, you needed to wrap it around this way and say so and so like this." And I'm like, and immediately I was like, "You're right. You're absolutely right." And so I fixed it, brought it back to him the next day, read the new ending with his suggestion, and that's what made the book. And he was super proud of that.
So fun.
So my kids I let my kids be a part of the creation, which is pretty unusual. That doesn't happen.
That's really cool. That's really cool. Yeah, and the way that I know Greg is from high school, although I just found out today he's actually younger than me, but we had an art class together, one in which I basically sat there for 2 hours doing nothing. Greg was actually creating stuff. Greg was making stuff.
I recall it totally different.
What were you doing?
I would have completely said the opposite.
Really?
That you were engaged in some
funny.
activity while I was whatever.
It's funny. I was just drawing stick figures. Greg was making stuff. I might have been trying to pass off certain things as useful objects for the evening. Ceramic type things, guys, if you get my drift. But that was high school. So I know Mr. Franklin broke a bunch of those. We never got away with anything in high school. But
he broke pottery if he felt it to be inappropriate?
Yes, he did. He broke the inappropriate pottery right away. But I had fun with that, and we did screen printing and stuff in there too. That was fun.
That's when I did the Charlie Manson t-shirts.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
They didn't go over.
Did they smash your
I know they were brilliant.
Did they smash your Charles Manson t-shirt?
I don't remember that.
He's not going to talk about that anymore. I remember we made our drama club t-shirts and art and things like that. So we had fun. But Franklin High School is just such a neat little place, and I'm so lucky to have grown up in that tiny little town.
So let's interject here, because we brought up Charles Manson. Who do you feel the real ringleader of the Manson family was? Was it Charles Manson or was it Tex Watson?
Oh, it was Tex all the way.
I agree, 100%.
It was Tex all the way. He was the football player, the scholar. He was our Oxford-bound boy. All right, it's Tex.
And he had crazy eyes.
Charlie was the patsy under the sink, if you remember. He was under the sink hiding when they took the
But I think Charlie liked the idea of being this cult leader, of being this.
Yeah.
So he embraced that, even though he was thrown under the bus, but he liked it under the bus.
Absolutely. That was his place.
Later in my life, Greg also made an impression when he was a camp counselor one year, and my son was one of the kids in the camp. And he would call my son Shadow because he would follow him around, but he would be very quiet. And so it's interesting now he has Where Shadows Walk. Isn't that
funny.
neat?
Yeah.
So yeah, but my son has never forgot that. I told him today, I said, guess who's coming to the live chat tonight? And he said, who? And I said, the shadow teacher. And he doesn't remember. He didn't go to your middle school, but he did, but he wasn't in 8th grade there.
He went 6th and 7th.
6th and 7th there. So, and it might have been before you were teaching. I'm not sure for sure. I don't know. So much has happened in so many years, But anyway, tell us about your favorite story in ghost country.
Oh my goodness. My favorite story in ghost country isn't a ghost story. My very favorite story in ghost country is what's the title of it? Mountain Witch, The Mountain Witch, maybe? That title? I don't even remember the title. 31 short stories in it. I think it's called The Mountain Witch. But it's the true story of a real mountain witch from this region, the only one that was ever caught on ever caught on film, ever. Now, witches, of course, in any environment, generally are sad, lonely people who live on the outskirts of town who are not witches whatsoever, who but get the title, the reputation. This lady was a witch. She proclaimed this. We have a wonderful petroglyph called Judaculla Rock.
Yes.
Very familiar.
Right? Love it.
Where she and others claimed that she would attempt to make wizards of people in the dead of night. All right? And so this was a real woman. It was actually the blood relative of my beloved wife right here. Her full name is Granny Rebecca Hoxett Galloway Aiken, and my wife's maiden name is Hoxett. She was blood relative. Anyway, I tell her story in the book, and the reason that it's my favorite story is because I was able to research online and find old genealogical accounts of grandparents and great-grandparents telling her stories to these great-grandchildren, and then they wrote them down, and then primary sources of secondary remembrances anyway, but the stories of her were so intense, of her turning, when she would try to come up to a fence, she would turn into a gangly calf, and she would shimmy underneath the fence and then come back to her normal form on the other side.
A shapeshifter.
A shape-shifting witch. And the thing is, you mix it all together, she proclaimed it. She said, I am this. You have all these people saying she was this. And so it was a great story to be able to write, and I had a lot of fun with that one. So it's not necessarily a ghost story, but that's my favorite story.
That is
So
really cool.
I find it interesting because it didn't seem like you were mentioning several witches in the book. Kind of what was the role of the Appalachian witch?
All right. The Appalachian witch, first and foremost, was the wild crafter. All right. You had extreme poverty in the late 1700s all the way up through the 1800s, and wild crafting was a way of life. Getting the roots, learning the roots, knowing what would do what. And if someone happened to be alone and elderly and female, all of a sudden they were a witch. And so in Macon County, we have the actual longest line of witches, or the best documented witches. We have Vice Borden. How do you not love the name Vice Borden?
I like that.
That was her name. That comes from the 1800s. Her name was Vice Borden.
That's a very nice name.
Yeah, that's perfect.
That's a good name.
If your child is gonna be born a witch, call her Vice. Right?
Yeah, I like that.
Right? Vice Borden.
We'll keep that on board.
Ann Cameron, Nancy Ann Ashcroft, the Mile High Witch. The Mile High Witch was interviewed by a Wilmington, North Carolina reporter in the year 1901. It's a fantastic story. Granny Rebecca Hoxett Galloway Aiken, who went by the nickname of Granny Beck. Actually, it was Granny Bake, because that's how the dialect of Bake, Rebecca, Granny Bake. It goes on and on, all these different witches. And they played an important role in the Southern Appalachian culture. I found a book that was published in the year 1928, but it was written in about 1898, and it's called The Lure of the Smoky Mountains. And there are entire just swaths of the entire book about the mountain witches, and those witches are mentioned in this book. And it's a fascinating read. Yeah. A lot of witches.
That sounds really interesting. Do you know of any in Waynesville in particular?
Yes.
Haywood County?
Oconee Sheen.
Oconee Sheen.
Have we never heard the story of Oconee
No,
Sheen?
I hear we live right here and we don't even know the story.
Oh my goodness. In fact, do you want to hear the story?
Of course we want to hear the story. Do you
Let's
guys
hear
want to hear the story?
Do you guys want to hear the story? I don't know why I'm shouting into my phone.
The story, in fact, this is great because this story hasn't been written yet. It's going to be one of the teen campfire stories.
Awesome.
All right? The story of Oconee Sheen is a true story. Oconee actually is the Scots-Irish term for mourning. If you were to have gone to a Scots-Irish funeral in the year 1750, you would have heard during the ceremony the chant of Oconee, Oconee, which is a sad, mournful, all right? All right, we're going to fast forward up into the 1800s. In the 1800s, all over western North Carolina, you could pick up jewels on the topsoil, all right? Like Franklin is the gem capital of the world, whether it be sapphire, ruby, whatever. Now, the story goes that a very angry mountaineer who lived right here in Waynesville, North Carolina, loved his wife, but he was a very rough man. Wife became pregnant. The child is born. The child kills the mother, which is very common back then. The child kills the mother. The mother dies in childbirth. And so the father names the child Oconee. Sheen is the last name of the father. All right, this is a mournful child, dismal, dark child. All right, the child is a normal child up until about the age of 10. At about the age of 10, he beats her so severely after some small infraction that her eye is punctured with something on a ring, a belt buckle, something he's beating her with, and the eye partially comes out.
Oh.
He goes ahead and removes the eye so there's nothing but a socket. All right? Now, the next part sounds like would be something in an R.L. Stein book, but she's along a creek bank, this young lady, when she's about 13 years old, and she finds a beautiful stone. And she works it herself with rudimentary tools until it's smooth. She then places it into the socket so that she has this, at least something in the eye socket. Now, nobody really ever sees her. She lives on the outskirts of town. She's in the woods here in the 1800s. But she becomes the witch of Waynesville, North Carolina. Oconee Sheen. All the kids talk about Oconee because her father dies and she becomes 40 and then 50, 60 and 70. And she is the ancient old woman that lives in the mountains here, Oconee Sheen. Now, word gets to a doctor here in Waynesville that old Oconee Sheen is dying. A neighbor has said that she's taken to the bed. All right, so out of his good Christianity, he takes off on horseback and he does the knock on the door, horrified to be standing at the door of Oconee Sheen when she doesn't come to the door. He opens the door, and the story goes that the fire in her front room there is just dying. It's down to the last embers, but it's giving enough light for him to see into the only other room of the house, which is the bedroom, and her face is illuminated by this last dying ember of the fire, and her eye is what he sees. Very Edgar Allan Poe-esque, the Telltale Heart. And then the fire goes out. He is calling her name, Miss Sheen, Miss Sheen, as he goes terrified, trembling into the bedroom. But when he gets there, she's been dead for hours. Rigor mortis has set in. All he's seeing is that open eye that's still lying there. She's dead. He knows very well that there are no family members, there's no community to bury her. So he scurries around the house and outside the house till he finds a shovel that she has. And he goes to the bank outside her house and he digs her grave. He then, no casket, no coffin, nothing like this. He takes her, he picks her frame up, He carries her out and he lays her in the hole. Her hands are crooked over her body's in a bit of a fetal position, rigor mortis, and he covers her back over with his hands first and then with the shovel. He then goes back into Waynesville. When he gets back into Waynesville, he runs into a friend on horseback, questioning what he's been doing. And he says, I just buried old Miss Sheen. Oconee, he says. Oconee's dead. He said, I just buried her out beside her house. Did you see the eye? The friend said, did you see the eye? I saw the eye. And he says, do you think that's worth anything? We know where this is going, right?
Yeah.
The friend, over a nice bottle of a tall bottle of whiskey in several hours, convinces the good doctor that there could be a high price for the jewel that this old woman has had in her eyes since she was about 13 years old. So nighttime has fallen again. They've talked about it all day. On 2 horses, they ride out to the Sheen household. They find it just as they had. The moon is up, night birds are singing, the stars are out, and they go out to that bank. And the friend hands the doctor the shovel, and he says, dig her up, right? And he says, well, why do I have to do it? You know, by myself. He says, oh, you buried her. So he digs her up. He gets down until the spade hits the soft flesh of a human being, and then he gets down there in the hole and he starts pulling the dirt away from the jawline and the nose and the eyes, and there catches the moonlight, glistens that stone. And he's just about to reach in there and try to take that out of the socket when all of a sudden, out of the grave, her very thin little wrist, bony little hand takes him by the hand. Her mouth opens, her good eye opens, and she screams, Oconee lives! Oconee lives! He's absolutely horrified. He's screaming. The friend takes off running, saddles the horse, gets all the way back to Waynesville. The horse is panting and foaming, and he's just sweating and dying on this horse. Daybreak, all right? He paces the floor of his home all day long. My God, what have we done? What have we done? He's hoping and praying every hour that he's going to hear the clip, clop of the good doctor's horse's hooves, but he doesn't. He doesn't hear it. And so by nightfall, he realizes that he's to blame for this. He's no longer soused with whiskey. He's now sober, and he decides he's going to do what's right. And he rides back out to the Oconee Sheen home site by himself. He gets there, very much a mimic of the night before, the moon, the stars, the night birds. He goes over, assuming he's going to find the open grave, the crippled, horrible-looking Oconee Sheen, the doctor possibly dead inside. But the grave's covered up. There's absolutely nothing looks awry. And so he picks up the shovel, which is still there, and he starts, the horse is gone, the doctor's bag's gone, there's nothing there. And so he works and works for quite a while until he once again gets down to flesh. And then he gets down, and the moon is just enough to let him peel back the dirt around Oconee Sheen and the good doctor. He is now in the grave with her, as dead as her, eyes open, mouth gaping, filled with mountain mud. And he just covers both bodies back up. And the history of her story still goes on to this day, that the doctor he never was found. The friend went back and said where the doctor was, but no one attempted to go dig it up, and said they thought he was telling a lie. He was never seen in the vicinity again. And so you needed a witch story of Waynesville. So Oconee Sheen.
We don't know where she's buried, do we?
We have no idea.
Wouldn't that be a great creative challenge?
See, in my head, I'm thinking, where's the grave?
That story actually made a really fine book that was published several years ago under the title of Oconee Sheen. Yeah.
And you have to wonder, the Decemberists have a song about,
What's that?
what is the name of that? How the hills of Oconee seem to pin me in. Now I know what the meaning of Oconee is. So.
Yeah, it's called the Yankee Bayonet.
Yankee Bayonet, that's right. It's a great song. You heard it?
Nope.
Check it out. Check it out. I'm going to add that to my, you better be listening to that on the playlist. Since we're not allowed to actually have music because YouTube doesn't let us.
You get copyright infringement if you try to play copyright music.
Unfortunately, I really wish I could have music at all times. All right. Gosh, that's an amazing story.
Yeah, it's a good
It's a really good
Oh,
story.
So-
I do like how the guy like digs it up. He's like, yeah, I'm done here. Just put that
Yeah,
back.
let me just put this back. I'm out of here. I don't know if I would have had the time to be covering it up.
I probably
got
would
out
have
of there.
been like gone.
Yeah. Ay. It wouldn't. Why did the doctor stay around? Gracious. He didn't get out there fast enough.
Listen, before we end tonight, you have to ask more about Waynesville because, boy, I found some stuff about Green Hill Cemetery you're going to want to know.
Oh,
One
wow.
thing, Green Hill, that's the one at the end of the animation.
Yeah.
The one thing that I found out about Green Hill that blew my mind, someone told me and I thought they were lying, but it's true, is that the man that was driving the car,
Alan or Richard Greer?
the man,
Richard, I think.
he was the driver of the car that JFK
That's right.
was shot in. While he was driving, he's buried here in this little mountain town,
That's right.
in our cemetery at the end of the street.
It's a fact.
Nuts.
Yeah.
Apparently I read something that he was cited for like because he looked back, which he wasn't supposed to do,
He didn't follow protocol.
and that wasn't protocol. I don't think he was ever.
He slowed down and he looked back, and it made him a suspect, and it made
Oh,
him...
there's still people that believe he's the
Absolutely.
second shooter.
Absolutely.
But yeah, he was never. I don't think he was ever formally punished or
But he
reprimanded.
escaped here to Waynesville, North Carolina, lived the rest of his life, died in 85.
Did he just? I mean, was
His
there?
wife is still alive here.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my gosh, where?
I've been meaning to contact her for 2 years. I don't know. I actually
She
had
may
the
be the
physical
kind of
address.
person that doesn't want to talk
I
about
actually
things.
had the physical address. I've lost it now, but it's something you could easily find. Yeah.
I wonder if it could be this brick house I'm thinking about that my friend, whose husband is a town attorney, may know.
Guess the
about.
driver of the
That's
car.
interesting.
Maybe so. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
I
just
get-
thinking she's like an older widow.
I
Yeah,
tell
people
you-
are commenting in the chat. It looks like he pointed a handgun at Kennedy.
Yeah.
Lots of theories there. Yeah.
One of my favorite stories up at Green Hill, which is literally a mile from where we're
Oh
sitting
yeah,
right here. I mean, it's
definitely.
just
Walking
Yeah, we could pick up
Is-
the camera and walk down
yeah,
there.
Gig Young. Do you know about Gig Young?
No.
Gig Young, you're gonna love this. All right, was an old school movie star. He won in the year 19. If I'm think I'm getting this right. 1977, he won the Academy Award for Best Actor for, I think they shoot horses, or do they shoot horses, or something about shooting horses.
They shoot horses, don't they?
Yeah, they shoot horses.
I've never
don't
seen it. I was just flipping through the TV once, and that
Yeah.
came on. I never forgot the
All
name.
right, well, the star is Gig Young, and he played with Elvis Presley, and he played with Bogart, and he played with all of the major stars of the 40s, 50s, 60s. And in the year 1978, he put a pistol to his young bride's head, blew her brains out in a New York City hotel room, and then he turned the gun on himself. They took his body back to LA for a huge Hollywood funeral, but then they put him in a hearse, and they took him on a cross-country trip all the way to Waynesville, North Carolina,
Really?
where they buried him beside his parents here. All right, Gig Young was not his actual name, so he's under his real name. It's easy. You can Google it and you can find it, where he's out here in Waynesville. But what was really interesting is after Bruce Lee died, the last film Bruce Lee was in wasn't released till years after Bruce Lee died. All right, and so Gig Young, Ladybug, that's lucky.
Yeah.
Gig Young finishes that film. They bring it to Gig Young, and he finishes that film years after. That's the last work that he ever does, was basically finishing the film of a ghost before he did what he did, and that's fascinating. You've got the very last officer of the Confederacy buried over there. You've got Robert E. Lee's bugler is buried over there.
Oh, really?
Absolutely.
Neat.
You've got multiple.
Who
Judge
is
Felix
the,
Alley. Yeah.
Who's that?
The guy that was
Fantastic
13
local.
Moons,
Charles Frazier.
but the character it was based on is buried there. Thomas. What's his?
Yeah,
Was it
William-
Swanger?
Colonel William Holland Thomas.
Yes.
A Confederate colonel. Absolutely. And he's the one
And he was a Cherokee, but they made him a Cherokee Indian chief. And I think
he was the only white Cherokee Indian chief. His father, the father that adopted him, was the great chief Unaguska, and also he was the only chief that was rumored to have come back from the dead. They had him for 4 days on his funeral pyre, or however you say that, and he woke up and gave an entire lecture to the entire village about the evils of alcohol, and then he laid his head back down. You can find that in any
I thought the lecture would be don't put people on a pyre unless you're sure they're dead.
So yeah, he's buried over there, William Holland Thomas.
Wow, interesting. I have to ask you a question, changing the subject just a little, but we'll come back to Green Hill. But coming from Franklin, there is a place called the Indian Mound. It's just simply the Indian, Nicowassee Indian Mound. It's in the middle of town. We never referred to it as Nicowassee. We just referred to it as the Indian Mound or the Mound. And, right downtown in the center of everything. What is your theory on what is in there? What do you know?
All right, first of all, we'll go back to the year 1761. In 1761, first of all, you know this, and anybody who's watching this can go and Google images of that mound today, and it's basically just a little bump on the earth.
The old pictures, it's like 3 times as big for some reason.
In the old pictures, only go back to the 1800s, goes without saying, but it's about 3 times as big. If you were to go back to the year 1761, it's going to be about 5 times that. All right, here's how we know this. Who's seen the movie The Patriot? All right, with Mel Gibson.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Mel Gibson was portraying Lieutenant Francis Marion of the French and Indian War. All right. Mm-hmm. Lieutenant Francis Marion says in his memoirs, "I learned the true art of guerrilla warfare at Nicowassee." All right. He and his army, that was Grant, not Ulysses, that's a different Grant altogether, and Moultrie of Charleston fame, and Pickens, and so many others, they came to Franklin, North Carolina in the year 1761, and they just decimated thousands of Cherokee Indians. Now here's how big Nicowassee was at that point in time. It was so big that on top there was a council house that could seat 300 elders. However, they used that council house whenever they commandeered it as Lieutenant Francis Marion's field hospital for all of his men. They laid out hundreds of men on the flat top. It was supposed to be anywhere from 4 to 7 stories high at that time period.
I'd like to point out that currently you could probably lay 12 people up there.
Right.
You could definitely easily get up to the top. I've done it.
There are maps. There are maps and drawings rendered in the year 1761 that show what a beast it was. 4 flat sides, earthen mound, very Mayan looking, earthen stairs going up to the top, and what do I think's in it?
Well, what happened? Why did it shrink?
Here's why it shrunk. First of all, it was destroyed by the white man. All right. The very first thing that they did when they came was put out the eternal flame. All right. That flame had been going for at least hundreds of years.
Pause right there. There's always a flame in Cherokee as you enter and as you leave.
So the flame had been going for at least hundreds of years. Well, the first thing they did was put it out. All right. And then over the next 10, 15 years, they started to cut it away, all right, as just an insult, adding insult to injury. And then after you had legitimate farming going on, then because of the open area, because you'd remove the earthen top, you have the soil starting to fall away. And so now, after all these years, you have this small little mound that's left, just a kind of a hint of what it used to be. Yeah.
That's
so
awesome.
that's the story.
Do we know what's left in it?
There's a million other stories. Well, you've got the great story of the ghosts inside the mound, the Noonie that came out.
They're supposed to be like spiritual warriors?
Absolutely. They're supposed to be spiritual warriors inside the mound of Nicowassee that came out hundreds of years ago and slaughtered an enemy tribe, were seen during the American Civil War, so on and so forth. But as recently as 1955, a local historian, actually a very good friend of mine, Riley Henry, was the one that he was digging a septic tank for a Sinclair gas station at the very edge, and he pulled up a full skeleton himself. They took it to a museum in Knoxville. And so, yes, it was most likely burial. If you go to the Historical Museum on Franklin's Main Street, you will see the most incredible statues that have been pulled from the outskirts. Just, the rain will unearth a little piece of one, and what they are, they're fertility statues, and they're the same ones you see in Europe. They're the very same ones, and it really lends credence to the theories that not only Beringia offered people a way across to the New World, but also the 1990s theory that ice was across the Atlantic because of the caches of the arrowheads we find in Virginia, so on and so forth, from French stones. But
interesting. I have to wonder too. So these fertility statues, what did they look like? Because the African ones have the big flat head. They almost look like a female symbol. Like
they're female. They've got the breasts. They've got the. You'd have to Google them, but but you can probably even Google them from that museum, and somebody's probably taking pictures of them, or you can go down there.
We love that museum so much. We actually have a little stepping stone out there. That says,
my name.
To my love, Jacob. That's what it says. If anybody's ever interested. But we love that museum, and we entered a photo contest there one time, and Photos of Pleasant Hill won. So with my son looking out the window. Yeah, it was really neat. Franklin's a really mystic place.
Oh, I can't have you say that without giving you this. Everybody watching this knows what an EVP is. Where was the first EVP ever captured on planet Earth?
No.
Franklin, North Carolina.
No, are you serious?
Get ready. Get ready. All right. In the 1970s, a millionaire by the name of George Washington Meek moved to Franklin, North Carolina because he had a dream. The dream said, if you want to make your devices that communicate with the dead and capture their voices happen, you've got to go where the veil between the living and the dead is the thinnest. The dream said it's a place called Franklin, North Carolina. He was a millionaire who made his money in air conditioning glass front skyscrapers around the world. At 60 years old, he retired from that, moved to Franklin where the dream said he needed to go. He invited scientists from all over the world to come and help him. He built houses for them around his home. And in April of 1982, the very first EVP ever captured on planet Earth was captured in Franklin, North Carolina. A very lengthy dialogue with foreign-tongued scientists. It's still studied to this day at universities. George W. Meek would not leave the area. He went on to capture thousands of EVPs, create the first ghost box called the Spiritron. He's the father of that as well. And when it came time for his wife to die, he said, you're going nowhere but Woodlawn Cemetery in Franklin, North Carolina. He's buried beside her. He died in 1999. And you can go on YouTube and you can watch him receive honorary doctorates from universities from all over the world for his contributions to the paranormal sciences. And people come from all over the world annually to go stand at his grave because he is the first Franklin, North Carolina.
How neat is that?
Yeah.
And how many people would love to have this guy for their history teacher? Gosh, my history teacher was so boring. Did you have Mr. Hawkins?
Oh,
I'm just gonna go ahead and call him out.
Are we calling out the history
Bless
teacher?
his heart. He was
I
a
didn't
really
have it.
sweet guy,
I
but
didn't
he
have
had he just did these long history fill in the blank papers that we had to do
No.
every day.
We can't do any of those.
And,
no fill in the blank.
It was so boring. I remember Jeff Clark would always laugh about it, and he made a great fiction story one time about being wrapped in those papers with the blanks. And but anyway, I don't know if he's a relative, but that was funny.
He's not.
Funny stuff.
He's not.
Yeah. Small town, so you can't tell with Franklin. Everybody's related pretty much somehow.
Everyone's related to you, is that what you mean?
Yeah, to me at least. I don't even wasn't even in Franklin. I was in Otto, so that's a different neck of the woods. And I went to Otto school, and I surely wish that there could be some kind of paranormal research there, because that's a really
It's a knife store
beautiful
still,
place.
right?
Now it's a knife store.
The current Union Academy, though, right across,
yeah.
very near, has wonderful stories. Wonderful stories. The principal has contacted me about a little girl in a sackcloth dress, bare
Really?
feet, that the teachers are really bothered by because she disappears into the walls. Franklin, everywhere you look, has ghost stories.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So tell us what some of the comments are Jacob, since we're not able to see them. Not only could we not read it if we could see them, but because you guys are far away, we had to get everybody
people
in.
people have gone off on a tangent about sleep paralysis.
Sleep paralysis is what everybody's talking about.
Sleep paralysis.
The
Is that
boo
is that
hags
the flavor
gotcha.
of the day?
Yes.
Sleep paralysis.
Sleep paralysis. Every time I think of that, I think of boo hags.
Boo hag.
Yeah.
We've heard those stories.
Oh yeah. You know how interesting it is that we went down to Charleston and we've done so many tours down there, and you know, we found out that they paint the porches and the ceilings of the porches blue to let the ghosts think that it's water or whatever. And then we found a church like a mile away from here, and every step leading up to that church is that same color blue. And then I started thinking, I just wondered if that's related. I never heard that story up here.
They call it Haint Blue.
Haint blue, that's right.
Aaron Brooks says, "Tell Greg his son says hey."
Hey, buddy.
Is that your son?
Yes.
It is.
You never know on the internet.
Could be anybody. How's he doing in there? Having a good time, I hope. All right. Well, I can't believe that I finally know the story about Nick Wassey. That's really interesting.
Yeah, there's
Good.
a lot more to it, but that's a big chunk of it right there.
Hmm. Well, when I was a kid, we just had so many theories about what was in there, but most of them were burial grounds, or it was used for like some kind of mystical services.
Have you ever
or something
heard?
like that.
Have you ever heard of the? And I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. It's a Native American monster, the Uthenka.
Ukatina.
Okay, you can pronounce it better than that.
He does better.
It's a snake. If I'm correct, it's a snake with antlers
Mm-hmm.
and a jewel or stone in his forehead.
Mm-hmm.
And from what I've heard, that there is actual people alive that claim that after the monster was killed, that humans have the jewel in possession to this day.
That sounds like Harry Potter.
People claim to have seen. Apparently, it has powers of controlling people. I had someone actually email me claiming that they had seen it themselves.
The Cherokee Indians are firm believers in the Ukatina, and claimed it was about a 200-foot long serpent, especially that lived in the Nantahala area. That's where they claimed that this snake lived. Yes, that it had the jewel on the forehead and the horned, it was horned. That goes back for hundreds of years, and the indigenous people are firm believers that it was, at least it was in existence. Yeah. They have, the great beliefs in the little people and the moon-eyed people, and goes on and on.
Annabelle
What do you
still
know-
can't live because of the little people. We took her when he was practicing for your tours. He
Why would the
went
little
and took
people?
us on the tour.
The little people. Why would that scare her? That's
That
like the
was
least scary
the
story.
thing she couldn't live with. It was like
It's like the gummy bears or something.
she's
Bouncing
like,
here and there and everywhere.
she couldn't handle it. But
Yeah, there's
she hates the sound of small people laughing, like like
oh, we did it. We did an escape. We did an escape room, and it was a Krampus themed escape room out in Myrtle Beach. And there was a room you enter in, and it's covered with stockings hanging, and then there's elves laughing, saying, "Find the key, find the key." And I thought she was gonna have a panic attack.
She really didn't like
But
that.
anyone's not familiar with the Cherokee? Could you maybe talk about the Cherokee Little People for those that aren't familiar?
The Cherokee Little People, the Cherokee Indians today claim that when they came to this area hundreds of years ago, because they claim they did not build the mounds, that they commandeered the mounds of this area, they claim that when they got here, that there were beautifully cultivated crops, fields of corn, that there were tiny little dwellings, that so on and so forth, but the people were gone. And their belief is that they went underground to their dwellings when they arrived.
Mhm.
However, they have multiple stories or characteristics, I guess you'd say. Some people look at the little people as devilish little trolls, basically. Other indigenous people look at them as little helpers. A child gets lost in the woods, the little people help them find their way home. My favorite little person story. There's an elderly woman who works at the elderly Cherokee, full-blooded Cherokee woman who works at the Swain County Historical Museum. And I asked her on a very quiet day, there was nobody in there, I said, "Would you please could we talk about stories, because I was doing the tours. I want to know everything about everything. And she wouldn't say the word little people. She said Cherokee people don't say, we'll not say it, but we'll talk about it, but we just can't say it. So she would talk about it.
Like a Voldemort thing?
She couldn't come out of her mouth. But she said that she experienced them multiple times as a child. And she said when people would come to your house, neighbors or family members, visitors, maybe from another area, the little people hated it when visitors came to a house. She said that they didn't understand why, but maybe because they were familiar with who was already in the home, and they didn't want visitors coming from another area to stay. So if people came to stay, an aunt came to stay for a weekend or whatever, that the little people would make it hell on the entire household
didn't
that
like
night,
strangers.
throwing rocks at the side of the house, visible. You could see the rocks, you could see the little people. And that was a fun story that I got from this woman who claimed that she experienced this. She's very much alive today, and it's a lucid conversation, and I have no reason to disbelieve what she says. So,
Annabelle has frequent dreams about the little.
Someone said that, I don't know how to pronounce this, but it said that the Choctaw have stories of little people as well.
And people keep saying mole people.
Where are mole people from?
Well, underneath Western Carolina University, a few decades ago, when the McKee building there was something wrong with the McKee building. They were going to have to do some work underneath. They were tearing out some lower walls, and they found tunnels. There's an actual book about this with the images. They found tunnels that were about 2.5 feet high, and they went way on back, right? And they were carved with human tools, right? You could see all the tool marks all the way back, but they were only about 2.5 feet high. And a professor claimed to have pulled a skull from those tunnels, and it sat on his desk for about 30 years. It was about the size of an orange, but it had all of its teeth and its molars, and he claimed that it was the skull of one of the little people, and that skull, of course, has since disappeared, like everything always disappears.
Of course.
But
what did you think? What do you think about that?
Oh, I believe that everything's possible. Absolutely. I tell my kids in school, one of the first things I tell my kids, I said, if you're going to take my English classes, my history classes, I won't ever try to indoctrinate you into anything at any point. I said, but I do want you to understand how I think and how I think you should think. I said there are two types of people in this world. I always say this. People who will not believe anything until it's proven to be true. And the other people are people who will believe anything until it's proven to be false. I said, I totally choose to be the latter.
I'm the latter.
Absolutely.
I believe
because it's
everything.
so
I'm
much
such a
more
sucker.
fun. It's so much
more fun,
Yep.
isn't it?
Yep.
It is.
And ironically enough, the McKee building where the tunnels were found, it's the anthropology department.
It's also the social work department, y'all. That's where I graduated. Yep. What else are we seeing here in the comments?
What school? It's Western Carolina University is what we were talking about.
Cullowhee.
In Cullowhee, North Carolina.
Yeah. Only the best place. Is that where you went to college?
Mhm.
Okay.
Sure did.
Me too.
My lovely wife as well.
Awesome. And what do you do?
Third grade teacher.
A third grade teacher. I love that age.
Yeah, it's a great age.
That is
That's awesome.
third grade is, I think, the
The
childhood
best.
optimum. They're old enough to take care of themselves, but they're still nice.
Yes,
Yeah,
It's
they
like,
are.
They're
and
still
then a few
cute.
years, that's the peak. That's the peak of the mountain. And then they start getting nasty and rebellious
I love my kids.
downhill from
When they
there.
come to middle school to see you, Greg.
Oh, I love it.
I couldn't do it. I don't know how
love it.
anyone could teach middle school.
How do you deal with the giggling?
It doesn't bother me.
Just the giggling doesn't bother
Yeah,
you?
nothing bothers me.
I would rather
The giggling.
I would rather spend a day in a room with 20 badgers for 8 hours
Then
than
hear a giggle fest?
than to just have
That's my
middle
job
school.
security. It doesn't bother me.
You're
Most
cool
people
with
say they
that.
can't handle it. I love it.
Is there a turnover? I mean, is there a lot of teachers that like
There used to be, but now we have at Macon Middle School. We have the one of the top 5 schools in the entire state.
Nice.
That's
We made the
awesome.
newspaper this morning. 99 percentile in growth at Macon Middle School.
Wow.
And so the superintendent actually said school systems from all over the state will be contacting us to find out what we're doing right.
We have, and
That's amazing.
I don't need to brag or anything, but you know, people dump on the Appalachian Mountains. We have some of the best schools here, best elementary schools. The school my daughter went over here before they closed it for tax reasons was
Don't get me started.
extremely highly rated.
Wonderful college professors.
Absolutely.
We got some, have college professors who are best-selling authors all over the world. People come here because they want the eclectic lifestyle. Professors, teachers come here, so these kids they've got a great education.
They do, and they have a wonderful playground to experience it in. And I hope that all of you out there get a chance to come out here and experience this, and not just Gatlinburg and Asheville and great places, but the rest of this place is what's wonderful. It's what makes the Appalachian culture and what makes me so proud of being from here. It's a wonderful place.
Also, you mentioned earlier when we were talking with the little people, the Moon-eyed people.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in I wish I remember the name of the museum. I think it's a museum in Murphy, North Carolina, has a statue of two conjoined figures that look suspiciously like what you may call a gray alien. What can you add as far as the Moon-eyed people and who the Moon-eyed people are?
The Cherokee Indians, called the Moon-eyed people, the blind bearded ones. All right. If you go into a cavern and you have fish down there, they're blind, white, white eyes, and they claimed that those people looked like that. They just had swirling white eyes, but they also had small beards. And there's so many theories about different people coming from different places. Are they seeing these indigenous people? Are they seeing this or that, right? But that's the best way I can describe how they describe the Moon-eyed people. The museum you're talking about over in Murphy have those statues. They do look like aliens. They absolutely do. They do not look like white-eyed bearded people, like like the custom says. But it's over there in Murphy, and Murphy has some fantastic stories over there.
I don't know what that is.
The father of Abraham Lincoln is most likely buried in Murphy, North Carolina. Anybody out there who doesn't know this story, look
Mr.
this up. All right, Abraham.
I
Yes.
did one of my first videos on my channel was actually on this subject. I'm trying to put it all back together in my head, but the theory is that Abraham Lincoln, that Nancy Hanks was a servant here,
A bond servant
that was impregnated by a farmer, or what would he be? He owned a farm, right?
He was a wealthy farmer.
Wealthy farmer, was impregnated, so he paid Thomas Lincoln basically to take her away and raise Abraham Lincoln as his own.
The best evidence that anybody has in the case, and multiple books have been written about it. The first book to come out to national acclaim was the 1899 Genesis of Lincoln book. But the best evidence is the minister who married Tom Lincoln to Nancy Hanks in the year 1809. The minister, men kept journals back then. They called them men of letters. If you were a teacher, you were a minister, clergy, they called you a man of letters. And so men kept journals every day of what they did. And this minister wrote down his daily events. And we have it in writing, still under glass in a museum, that he says, it was atrocious what happened today. I married Thomas Lincoln to Nancy Hanks, and when the service was over, she went over and took the hand of a 3-year-old child by the name of Abraham and led him away as her son, and to have a child out of wedlock prior to was just, and so that's the best evidence that we have.
Also, there's another good piece of evidence that kind of sold me on this as being really legitimate, is that if you look at
the familiarity, the likeness.
Well, yeah, you find the original Abraham Enlow. You find there's a picture of his son. I don't think there's any pictures of Abraham Enlow himself, but there's a picture of his son, and it is remarkably looks like Abraham Lincoln. This tall, gaunt, big-nosed man. I mean,
Who looks like an Appalachian native, doesn't he? I mean, he really does. And there is just
However,
a ton.
Thomas Lincoln was 5'10" and stocky.
there you
All right?
go.
Nothing
Well,
like
you know.
nothing like Lincoln.
I've got as it's funny. As you know, the states in the Midwest are very competitive about their connection to Lincoln.
Yeah.
Kentucky, you enter, the sign says the birthplace of Lincoln. Illinois is the land of Lincoln. Indiana markets itself as Indiana. What was it? Boyhood home. I got a lot of hate for like even talking about the fact that Lincoln may have been born in North Carolina.
Yeah.
People get really defensive about it.
Guys, Ohio didn't invent flying either. It's just wishful thinking.
The Wright brothers didn't invent flying either. Look it up. It's a conspiracy. No, when the Wright brothers. Well, we're not talking about the
We're
Wright
not going
brothers.
to talk about that.
The Wright brothers
This
cover
is the
up.
best state in the United States, guys. Come
But
to
you
it.
do know that when the Wright brothers family donated all their artifacts to the Smithsonian, it was under the contract. They gave them a list of people that they were not allowed to ever mention in the Smithsonian. You know, the people that figured out how to fly before them. Just saying. Do your own research.
Okay, I have a cat on me.
Oh, I'm
Mason.
so sorry. Mason, come on.
That cat bomb.
Just throw him off. Let me grab your beer.
This was his chair,
It was.
and
He's
he wants it
He's
back.
interested in you. Sorry about that. And my first thought is, how cute. Let me give him a pet.
But I did hear that there was another theory that oh God, why can't I? I'm so dumb. Why can't I think of his name? The president of the Confederacy,
Jefferson Davis.
Jefferson Davis. They said that Jefferson Davis
History
and
teacher.
Abe Lincoln were secretly brothers.
That's a crazy theory.
Another one of the theories that, in fact, another great theory that came about in a book about this thick called The Random Thoughts and Musings of a Mountaineer by Judge Felix Alley, who is buried about a mile from here in Green Hill Cemetery. Judge Felix Alley. You need to get this book, The Random Thoughts and Musings of a Mountaineer.
Okay.
He was a very famous Southern judge. He speculates that Lincoln was the son of John C. Calhoun, the vice
Oh.
president of Andrew Jackson.
Wow.
Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah, you go deep down the Lincoln's father rabbit hole.
Well, let's get back to ghosts. Who's got something about the ghosts?
Let's hear it from the expert. Tell us a good one.
Oh goodness, I need a prompt.
Someone says, I don't know who this person is. Someone says, what's your opinion of Stephen Huff?
Who's that?
I don't know.
Who is Stephen Huff?
I need to know Stephen Huff, and then I'll give my opinion.
We don't know Stephen Huff.
We
Okay.
don't know Stephen Huff. Sorry, guys.
Comparisons of John F. Kennedy and Lincoln's death. I think a lot of people have heard that.
Fun stuff.
Well, tell us something that has chilled you, Greg. Something that has touched you personally.
Okay. All right. I'm going to tell you a story that bothered me. Now,
Get over here so we can both touch.
I don't get bothered. All right, I can sleep in a graveyard. I can sleep in a cemetery. I'm comfortable in that environment. When I was a little boy, since I was a tiny little boy, I've had ghosts, experiences. You know, it goes on up to my age right now. But I met a man probably 3 years ago. He called me up after school. I'm not going to. He called me up after school, and he said that he had pictures of me he wanted to talk about. All right. So I'm listening to him. He said that he's the leader of a paranormal investigation group out of Florida,
Oh.
and that his investigation group had walked a tour with me the previous summer, and he had not.
Just slightly.
He had not been on the tour.
Mhm.
He said, but they walked the tour, he loved the tour, talked about the stories, and he said, and they took pictures all along the route. And they took pictures of me telling the stories. Goes without saying, and they took pictures of me. So he being intuitive, being able to see things that I couldn't, he calls me to tell me that I have an apparition that is attached to me. A soul that is attached to me, an attachment ghost. As I said before, I don't disbelieve anything. I don't call anybody a crackpot. All right? I'd be the last person to call anybody a crackpot. So I'm listening to him, and he tells me more about it, and he wants to meet with my lovely wife and myself. And so we agree. And we go out to breakfast, and his wife is amazing. She's wonderful. He's kind. He's retired military, Vietnam veteran. And then we end up, weeks later going to their house and having a nice lunch and on a Sunday evening, and everything's good. About 3 or 4 outings with this gentleman and his wife, we were at lunch at his house, and he wanted to show me images that his paranormal investigation group had taken on a recent hunt in Florida. And so he goes into the living room, and he sits down in a lazy boy recliner. Well, the closest chair to him is a couch across the room that I can't sit there and see anything. So he tells me to go to the dining room and get a chair from the table and go sit kind of beside him. He then has his laptop on his legs. He's put his feet up on the recliner, put the foothold or footrest up, and there's a large screen television off to the side. So he's going to be able to show me the images, and it's going to come up on the television. So I'm sitting there beside him, and he's showing me these images. And probably 10 minutes into it, I'm looking at orbs and shadows, and he's telling me where they're at and what they caught here and there. I had on a sport coat and a button-up shirt, untucked, jeans and boots. I'm leaned forward in this chair, looking at his laptop and looking at my peripheral at the television, when up my shirt goes a cold little hand all the way to the back of my neck.
Ooh.
Just all the way up, fingers crawling all the way up to the back of my neck. I jump up, and my first response, funny thing, we got a cat beside us, my first response was, "Your cat got me." And I screamed it. I go, "Oh my God, your cat got me, your cat." And I'm looking around because that's the only thing I could think of, was somehow his cat had scurried up my back,
You didn't have a cat.
He never turned to me. He never looked around at me. He just, in a very matter-of-fact manner, said, "We don't own a cat." Just like this. And at this point, I look out in my peripheral vision, and I see my lovely wife and my 2 kids and his wife and their little Lhasa Apso dog playing on a porch, kind of a deck outside, and they've got the door shut. That's where they'd gone to hang out while I looked at these pictures. And so there are no other people in this house other than him, who's sitting in front of me with his hands on a laptop, and me sitting quite behind him. So there's nothing to have done this. All right. Well, I kind of got a little angry. I'm just like, oh, it's time to go, because I had never in my life been touched like that, where a cold hand went all the way up my back to the back of my neck. And so when we left, I told my wife, I don't know about going back. Something was wrong here. All right. However, I missed a little part of the story. After I'm standing there and I'm kind of, looking around, and he's told me he doesn't have a cat, he says, "That was Kari." I said, "Oh." He says, "She's just letting you know she's here." Okay. Well, that did nothing for me, and so
Kari,
I left, right? It was 1 week later. That was on a Sunday. The next Friday night, I had a tour. I had 17 people on the tour. I remember the number because of what happened. 17 people on the tour, and I went, the cat's going to come over here. And I was standing in a beautiful 1828, the home was built in 1828, the home of Jesse Seiler, beautiful home. And I'm standing down there telling the story of how the first stagecoach got to Franklin down there, telling the story of of a decapitation of a slave that happened there in the 1850s, so on and so forth. So I'm telling all these stories, and 17 people are sitting there listening with eyes wide, listening to the stories. One father, he's about 6'5", tall guy. He had a 4-year-old child on his shoulders, carried him the whole way. When he got down there, he decides he's going to put him down, and he says, "Hold on to my leg," he says. He says, "Hold on to my pants leg, because I'm going to take some pictures." All right, cat's butted right in my face.
I know, they do it.
They got to get
That's
you.
the thing. Come on, Mason, get down. Mason Dixon, Mason. We had a Dixie.
So the Mason, you totally threw me off.
A person with a child on his shoulders and then let the child
Okay,
down.
so he puts the child down, and the child does hold on to his daddy's pants leg. Now, because he wants to take pictures, the dad has a camera on a strap around his neck. So while I'm talking, he starts, messing with the lens and taking pictures of this beautiful old mansion in Franklin. The child's mother has gone about 20 feet in front of the house, and she's taking frontal pictures of this house. And so at no point in time are they either one listening to my stories, but that does happen every now and then on a tour where people just take off, start taking pictures. They're, So I'm talking to the other 15 people there, whatever. All of a sudden, the child takes off running. Not toward the road, which would have been a fear, but toward the dark, abandoned 1828 mansion. The child runs up onto the porch. Gotta put this down to do this. The child runs up onto the porch. All of us are watching. I tug on Dad's shoulder and I say, "Dad, your kid, he's running up onto the porch." But at this point, he's already up there. And the little 4-year-old boy looks at nothing. There's nothing on the porch. And he goes, "Girl." And his hands go through nothing after he says girl. His dad gasps and goes, "Huh!" It's like this, right? Because what is going on here? His dad turns to me and says, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm doing nothing, Your kid, ran up there, right?" Mother runs over there. Dad's running over there. Dad scoops him up. Dad's standing on the porch at this point in time. And Mom is standing there off the porch, and she looks at Dad and she looks at Son, and she says, "Do you see a little girl?" And he's not even looking at either one of them. He's looking down now because Dad's tall and he's scooped him up. He's going, "What's your name? What's your name?" And the 15 people sitting there going, "Oh my God, this is the best ghost tour ever." They're going, right? And all of a sudden he turns around and he goes, "Kari. Her name's Kari, Daddy. Her name's Kari."
Oh.
Now, hold on, stay with me here. All right. Then then he goes like this. The little boy goes, "Oh," and he looks at the door and he goes, "She went inside, Dad. She went inside." And Daddy runs him off the porch, looks at me and goes, "Let's go, let's go." They're angry, right? We take off back onto the tour. Now, that was a Friday night, okay? The previous Sunday had been our incident with the hand. I had kind of said, I'm going to kind of stay away, but now I got to tell him. I got to call him up. I got to tell him what happened. So it's about 7 o'clock in the morning. I know he gets up early and has breakfast because we've had breakfast with him. About 7 o'clock in the morning, I go outside to make the phone call. So I call him up. I got my cell phone, and he answers the phone. He goes, "Hello." This is the conversation. I said, "Hey, I got a story for you," just like this. And he goes, "Hold on just a second." "What? What?" And I can tell he's holding the phone like his chest. I'm going to say, "Oh," he's talking to his wife. She's relaying a message or something, telling me to tell something to Pauletta, whatever. So I'm waiting. And so he gets back on the phone. He goes, "Hold on. Kari wanted me to tell you that she played with you last night down at Jesse's house." And I'm going, my God, I'm calling you to tell you that this little boy ran up and tried to grab this little girl that he called Kari. And so at this point he goes, she was tugging on me saying she wanted you to know this. And he says to me, "So what do you want to tell me?" It absolutely messed my brain up. That's one of the stories, that's one of the things that happened to me. The combination of the hand that I felt all the way up. The little boy, her name's Kari. And the conversation, he could not have known Saturday morning what I was going to tell him. It was a perfect storm of a ghost story. Absolutely.
Pauletta, what do you think about things like this?
give
Are you
her the
afraid to
screen.
go
Let
to
her-
sleep?
let her-
No, it's okay, Chase.
Let her-
It's
Are
okay.
you
Chase.
going
Oh,
straight?
goodness.
It's
I'd
just
love to hear
normal.
It's just
It's
normal.
just normal at our house.
Ooh, tell them about some of the stuff in our house.
No.
Oh my gosh.
I had a experience that I've not been able to explain, and I want to see if, from your expertise, if it sounds like anything
Is
you.
this the spaghetti story?
No, maybe we'll get to the spaghetti story next. But all my paranormal experiences make me look like I'm an idiot. But so there was a night, me and Christy were laying in bed. I was kind of sitting up in bed. She was laying all the way down, so I could see straight out the window. And a literal ball of light moves in front of the window, goes up and down, and then like flies off. I mean, not a firefly. I mean, this thing was about the size like an apple, just pure light moving up and down and away. I called it, because the closest thing I could come up with was a fairy sighting, which people laugh at, but that's closest thing that I came to being able to describe it as. So I have no idea what I saw. I've seen, that was when we lived at our other house. At this house, I saw something similar further away up in the sky.
We also
moving.
saw one together one time. Remember, it fell in the yard, and I was convinced
We
it
thought a
was like,
meteor had
it
fallen.
had to
in
be
the
like a
yard. Yeah.
meteorite or something. It was like this big, and
But we couldn't find.
literally the next day I was like looking
We
for
couldn't find where it had
whatever
landed or
had
what had
fallen.
fallen.
Super common. Don't have the answer for you.
Okay.
I don't
So
have
other people have seen
no.
things like that.
Oh my gosh. My uncle, who lives not a half mile from where we live, he used to place metal stakes in the yard, in his yard and in his field, where these balls of light would go down into the earth. He would watch them in the night come across fields, come across the lawn, slowly come up to him, and then go down into the earth. And he would actually place metal stakes, you might say, to show people later on where they went, to see if where they went had any significance. My father was a police officer for 20 years. He was assistant chief of police in Franklin, North Carolina. And
Investigated my first car accident.
there you go. And we have a road, we have a stretch of road that goes up to our house called Haint Branch Hill, in which hundreds of drivers, it has this moniker because hundreds of drivers over the years have had the ball of light follow them at their passenger side window all the way along that mile or mile and a half of stretch and then shoot off into the woods. So I don't have the answer to what it is, but it's a very common sighting in the paranormal.
Question though,
Aren't they called like? Because when I saw the meteor go over that night, we looked it up and they had different names.
You'll find different names.
The thing is, the thing that got me was like the light was so intense that it seemed artificial. It didn't seem like an animal or an insect or anything could produce that much light, but it moved with purpose like something alive.
what part of town? I mean, west, east, south, north. Where do you guys live? North.
The northern
So
side.
okay, out 28.
Yep.
So that's interesting because I had gone to someone's house out 64 West, you know, as you're going out toward Hayesville, and they had this whole legend of the goat man that lived out in that area, swore that they had seen something like that, also described balls of light that would come from the ground.
There's several like goatmen dotted around the country. There's goatmen sightings.
Yeah, have you heard of things like that in Franklin too, about goat man?
As a kid, I used to hear stories, but I really, it's just references. You know, people
References
saying
and
I don't
stuff.
have anything more than just having heard about it.
Yeah. This one was a pretty nuts story. I've
My
told
other-
it here before though.
My other dumb paranormal experience is first we moved into this house. First time Christy
Okay.
ever.
This one to me is cheesy.
It's
Oh, let's hear
cheesy.
cheesy.
It's cheesy, but it's true, and it haunted me. Like, it gave me the chills. So, first meal we've ever cooked in this house. Christy made, what was the dish you made? It was a pasta
Chicken
dish.
piccata.
Chicken piccata. And I'm finishing up, and I look down, and I swear to God, and you saw it, and I don't know how you can laugh at me after you've seen it, but there was my name, Jacob, spelled in noodles in my own handwriting. And I've not had any other experiences in this house since then, and that's been 2 years ago. But it like I looked down and it like gave me a chill. It sounds dumb because it's spaghetti,
It does sound
but
dumb.
but it gave me a chill when it
Listen,
happened.
it sounds dumb, but it's not dumb. All right. So what? You know, something's messing with you with spaghetti. However, we've had things happen in the house that are crazy like that as well. So
Tell some of those things. What are they? What happens?
Pauletta doesn't.
Pauletta's like,
Selling shades.
no, they'll
Shade
know the
story,
real
which one?
crazy.
Seeing the little boy.
Oh, there's so many. When we first moved into the house, well, our son Shade, he's 13 years old, so that's the first house he was brought to after he was born. And when he was about 3 years old, he would run down the hallway chasing the little red-headed boy, and he would run and try to grab him. He would disappear behind the refrigerator. And the most off-putting little part of this that really did spook me, he looked up at me and he says, generally he stays under the kitchen sink. I'm like, thank you. I appreciate
that.
that.
I won't go under there. It's
I
good.
appreciate that.
We'll stay away from there.
So, I mean, but we've had so many stories. So many. Pauletta doesn't
We
like
did
to
have
talk
a
about
lady pass away in our house.
it. We did, but there's so many things. Pauletta doesn't like to talk about the things that go on in the house. It bothers her a little bit.
The previous house we lived in belonged to a lady who had the first kindergarten in Haywood County in our backyard. And it was about the size of the shed you can see right over there. It's a really small little tiny building that probably had enough room for 5 kindergartners and maybe a teacher. And it had been dilapidated to the point that the ceiling was coming down and there was a screen door to it. There were all these antiques just packed in there. It was really neat. The guy who lives there now inherited everything that was in the attic that belonged to
The
him.
landlord just I guess didn't want to go through the stuff.
No, and so when he sold it after we moved out, he just...
Oh gosh, you could probably pay for the house with the antiques in the attic.
I mean, it would have been great
Probably
for
make
the
your money back.
historical museum.
I found
or
out.
whatever.
I found this box full of stamps, but it was outside in the shed, so they were all like balled up, stuck together, useless. You know, you're never gonna make a penny off these. But I'm like, just to see, let's see how much these are worth. These were like, I looked them up on the internet, they're like $7-8 a piece. There's like hundreds of them in here. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh god.
Sad. And there were pictures of like gas masks from World War One.
There was pictures,
people and-
pictures of people
just-
in the trenches in World War One.
She had kept little trinkets from her class, her students. It
Oh
was
yeah, like
just-
she never threw anything away. Like
Yeah.
she had like a chest full of just like you know, like paper dolls and stuff that kids had made.
And from 13 Moons, the real trading post was
Apparently
across
the street from where we were.
Yeah. So very interesting.
Because it's Thomas Park was the street, so it was
Yeah.
named after.
It was a really fun place to live. And I had a lot of incidents there that I think were maybe paranormal, but interesting incidents, interesting things. I never had a bad feeling at all. I always felt very safe.
Some people were asking Greg if you did ghost hunting and if you used equipment to ghost hunt.
We have basically. We've got the little meters, and we've got the ghost box. What's it called? The
Spirit box?
spirit box, but it's got a name to it. I don't remember which one it is. We do the divining rods and recording devices for EVPs and things like this. And we don't do it often. We do it every now and then, just because we're so busy, with the kids and teaching and the tours and so on and so forth. But we will do every now and then. We'll do investigations, and if I had my way, we'd do that stuff like that all the time. That'd be great fun, but just time constraints. But we do every now and then. We do have some of the devices at home. Absolutely.
It'd be fun to see what about this house. It would be really fun to go back to our old house and see that. Really fun, but I don't know if the guy would ever want us back in there. He's such a nice guy, though.
Oh, he's a nice guy. It's funny. This is like another like bad thing turned good. Is like, psychos from the internet like write me letters. So they found my address over there after I moved, and were writing letters to the guy. So he got in contact with me. He's like, just to let you know, I'm getting a bunch of crazy letters. He's like, I looked up your videos. They're great. And I actually had a video of me showing the attic of his house that he was currently living in. So he got a kick out of that because he's been doing like more research on the house and the people that live there.
Yeah, well, the owner of the house had lots of information. He was one of these wonderful historian type people. He was really incredible. He knew a lot about the area, a lot about stuff. He's just a really nice guy. But his family got you know, it's just too much to be having all that, so they sold it. But really neat stories, really neat little neighborhood.
Are we gonna dare to take some calls?
Yeah, I mean, are we ready to take calls, guys? Is that what you want to do?
Would you guys like to take some calls? And basically what we kind of wanted to stick to is just kind of discussion, you know, with Greg about some of the paranormal stuff we've talked about, you know, questions or things you'd like to ask him. Okay, yes.
Yes. All right, well, who's going to really call? Okay, make sure.
Let me, okay, well, here, let me just take a comment. Well, there's two comments. I don't know whether this both popped up at the same time, but they wanted to know your opinion on Ouija boards.
I'm 100% against the use of Ouija boards because
I was about to follow up.
Because I believe in them. All right? If Ouija boards were a cute little Hasbro toy that they sell at Walmart, which they do, mind you, that they do, if they were cute and they were harmless, you know, I would say, yeah, go play, you know, and your mind will allow you to move this, you know, so on and so forth. But I'm a firm believer in good and evil. I'm a firm believer in the dark and the light. I'm a very firm believer that if you open yourself up to a game such as a Ouija board, that you can get a lot more than you bargained for, things that you're not going to be able to get out of your house or your life. And so I'm against Ouija boards.
That is kind of a scary thought. My daughter played with one at a friend's house, and she was terrified for weeks.
They got so scared they went and buried it in the backyard after they used it.
Probably.
Well, they didn't even go buy one. They printed one off the internet and used it.
And they buried it anyway?
Yeah.
I don't know. Okay.
Annabelle gets scared easy. She's
Truth.
very scared of paranormal stuff.
I don't think she's very scared of paranormal. James is more liable to that.
Well, James is a true believer.
James is a true believer.
But even the spirit box, this I've had people contact me. I had a young man contact me about 2 or 3 years ago, and he said that a spirit box had told him to contact me. And he said he didn't want to, but it had told him to contact me. He didn't know who I was. He looked me up, and I talked to him for a little while, and he never called me back. But I believe that. I believe that. I'm a firm believer that sure, a spirit box might have told him to contact me, but none of that is ever going to be positive. And if something isn't positive in life, it's a negative. There's not a middle ground right there. It's one thing to tell ghost stories. It's one thing to go into a haunted location with a recording device and hope to get the voice of something. Totally different than it is to beckon something from the other side to come to you, because we believe that the other side can come to you. And so I suggest against anything like that.
And it seems like the general consensus is people agree with you 100%.
Yeah, I'm pretty much for don't mess with it.
Yeah.
I've only played with a Ouija board once, and I think I was probably Annabelle's age. My mother had a lake house in northern Michigan in Sheboygan, which is close to Mackinac Island, like close to that area, very far north. And we would go, and it would be me and my cousins all weekend, and we would stay in the apartment above the garage, and boy, was that fodder for just fun kid stuff, you know. And I remember a bell on the porch that would ring, and on the garage apartment, and so anytime there was wind or a storm, and so that night we had a big storm, we had the bell ringing, we were playing the Ouija board, terrified, and I have not had a desire to do it since then.
That's good.
The gray man was spotted in
Paul's Island, yeah.
Oh, gotta love that.
Well,
Gray man.
I understand the gray man is supposed to be a positive spirit.
Yes.
That they say that he, I guess the legend is that he died in a storm, and that he appears before hurricanes, before major storms.
It goes back for a long time.
Warning people to
have
get
been
off
saying
the
for a
island.
long time.
I've heard that one a long time too.
Alright.
I love down the low country. I love it. I
I do
love
too.
when you drive into it and that smell of
We
the low
love it.
country hits.
We love
and
it.
Just
Fluff mud.
Yeah, we love it.
it's
What'd you
amazing.
call it?
Fluff mud.
Fluff mud.
Fluff
Fluff.
mud, that's right.
Yeah, yeah.
Get stuck in it. It's
Yeah, there's some of the best stories down there on the
yeah, they do.
low country.
Yeah, we love Charleston.
I do too. I
You've
think
got
it's like
you got the message, right? The Julia Lagarde
oh yes,
tomb.
yes. We
Oh
already
yes,
looked into
I
that.
need
You've
to. I
got
need to
to
go.
go.
I need to go find that.
You've got to go.
That is so creepy.
It's
I can't even
definitely on the list.
think
Got to
about
go.
it.
I had an experience at the Battery Carriage Inn.
Oh.
We were staying there for our anniversary trip, and we were in the carriage house in room 10, and we'd stayed because we'd heard that in room 8 there was a torso ghost.
Mhm.
So we were
Like
interested
everybody
in
else,
that.
we wanted a torso in our room.
Right.
The torso ghost.
We aimed for the torso ghost.
We were for the torso.
What is he? Just a torso?
Yeah.
Yeah, floating.
That's all
torso.
everybody sees, the torso.
He doesn't have a head
No, no.
or arms.
No.
So we didn't know anything about room 10.
That's disturbing.
Which this is the battery.
Yes, the
Okay.
Battery Carriage Inn. So we were in the carriage house, and we were at room 10, which had joined the main house. And we were upstairs. There was a veranda that overlooked the courtyard. So it was the last day. We were checking out, and they had these wonderful robes, these plush
We were polar
bathrobes.
bears.
Yeah, they were wonderful. And so Greg went to check us out, and I was wrapped up in that robe, getting the last little bit. And I saw the shadow come in front of the window, and I assumed it was him coming back to the room. But then I got the smell of really clean soap. And it wasn't like a modern day aftershave or anything. It was like a really clean soap smell. And so the shadow came across the window and stopped at a closet door that would have joined the main house. And then it disappeared. So I'm laying there in this bathrobe, and I'm thinking, why is he not coming in? Several minutes. So I go out. There's no sign of Greg anywhere. No sign of anyone anywhere. And so he finally gets back to the room, and I said, did you come by? This happened. It was really strange. I was telling him about it. Didn't think any more about it. So we checked out, and we're downtown.
At
We're
the Exchange.
at the Exchange, and we pick up a ghost story book.
Mhm.
So we're reading about the place we were just staying. And we come across room 10 and the gentleman ghost.
No, really.
And he only appeared to women who were alone.
Only to women who are alone.
Yeah. And he would usually lay down on the bed with them. And this
This is a
spirit did
creep
not do
ghost.
that.
He's a creeper. It's a Me Too moment with
But
a ghost.
so then
It also
I
said-
started shivering. And
also-
I'm like, oh my gosh,
All
I
the
saw
con-
this.
and also the women who had experienced this had smelled the
This
clean
smell.
smell, and that's in print in that book. They smelled this
Yeah.
clean smell, this weird smell.
Yeah, it wasn't weird. It was.
I mean,
it
this-
was a,
different
a
smell.
very nice smell, but
Mhm.
yeah. So that had walked by. So that was my experience. It was
That's where we
cool.
need to stay next time,
Yeah.
honey. Battery
The
carriage
Battery
Inn.
Carriage Inn, room 10 or room 8 if you're into torsos.
Right? Well, I think 10 would be
So what does
better,
it
more
do?
fun.
What does the torso
Floats.
The
do?
torso wanders through.
Is it the floating freaking torso?
Yeah.
Gosh.
What used to be the Citadel, I guess, they have a legend for a room there. And it's pretty scary because it was not a good apparition that visited someone in that room, and they had literally fled the room in their underwear, just to get out of the hotel because it scared them so badly.
And I wasn't scared. I didn't feel threatened or
Mhm.
anything. And so a little more research, and they don't know for sure, but they thought like a young cadet had come home
Mm-hmm.
and had fallen off the balcony to his death. And
Gotcha.
Where was the building in oh gosh, now I don't even know if it's Charleston or Savannah.
Savannah, that was the old Civil War
Where they
hospital.
where they found bones in the floor.
That was the old Civil War hospital in Charleston, and I remember, I don't know the name of the hotel, but that would be a really fun place to stay. That's actually what I was telling you earlier, that I would love to stay there.
Okay, so Christy, before we take any phone calls, why don't you go over the rules again?
All right, guys, it's okay to call, ask questions to Greg, but this is going to be Greg's story hour or story time. So if you have a call and a question, then we will take that. We're going to take about maybe 3, maybe 4 calls, depending on time and how long each one takes. I don't want to wear him out.
What's the number, Christy?
Tired. So 828
828
506
506
1643.
1643.
What does Prince say?
Still, that's
Oh,
here
already?
comes somebody.
Okay. All right.
Now, are we gonna set it up on the other tripod, or?
If you want to. Hi, you've reached the Carpetbagger phone. Who's calling?
Michelle.
Hi, Michelle. How you doing?
Can they hear?
Doing good.
All right. So we're gonna set this phone up to be next to the other phone. I'm gonna let Jacob take care of that, and then we
Where's
will
the
take your
tripod?
call.
Okay.
Okay.
So, hang on, real quick. Sorry, we should have already had this ready.
Let me see. Where does it need to go?
So remember, the speaker's in the front. It'll drive Prince crazy if you put it in the back.
Is this good?
I think so.
All right, go ahead.
Well, my question is, Greg, how do you feel about people that shadow walk when they dream? Is that a real thing, or is it just night terrors? Because I had crazy dreams all of my life. So I was just wondering, I'm not a shadow walker because I heard, like, a few of my friends are pagan, and then say, oh, you're a shadow walker, because I had night terrors all the time. So that's not a real thing, is it?
Explain to me a little bit more about what you mean by shadow walker.
Well, I had one friend said that I came through her house one time, and I had a dream about it.
Okay, so you say you have a friend who said that you came, that the friend said you came through her house one time. You were not there, but
I was at home sleeping, but I had a dream about it.
Okay. One time, I'm going to give you a little story about my family, and that'll kind of answer the question. One time my father, my mother, my brother, and his wife were at my father and mother's house. My wife and I and my children were not there. However, they heard on a very still day, about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, everything was quiet in the house, they heard my daughter talking and yelling out from the bedroom that she often loves to go sit in and watch television. And all of them were alerted to this. It freaked them out because they knew that we were not there. When they went to the room, of course, the sound stopped and she was not there. But she's very much alive. She's not a ghost. She's actually in the house right now. And so what you're talking about actually goes back a long time. People who move about when they're asleep. I've got books about this at my house, and there's lots of different names for it. People who dream very vivid dreams. They dream that they're flying over different nations, different places, different times. And you're saying that someone actually witnessed you in their home when you were dreaming of being in their home. And what I say to you is I 100% believe that to be possible. That what the mind can do, we know nothing about our minds, how to control our minds, what our minds have capabilities of, and we use such a small fragment of our mind. And I think it's very possible that does happen, that you might have in this metaphysical way walked through your friend's house while you were dreaming. I completely believe that can happen. Because people hear the living speaking in their own homes often. People who are not dead.
Just her night terrors, though.
The night.
No, I'm really scared.
The night terrors. My wife says to address your night terrors. How do you want me to do that?
I'd probably see your doctor about that. because you're probably not getting a good night's sleep. And our son did have night terrors. So I would see your doctor about some help when you're sleeping.
Yeah, you want to get rid of the night terrors. Everybody needs to be sleeping through the night. You need to try to figure out how to take care of that. And maybe if you take care of the night terrors, maybe that'll solve the other problem. Maybe.
You don't think it's any kind of medium, like being a medium, right? Or anything like that?
How old are you?
I'm 32.
32. I don't have the answer to that. No, I wouldn't say just because things like that are happening that you're a medium or that you're prescient or you can do anything more. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. I don't know, but I wouldn't leap to that. I wouldn't go that far.
Fine, it's not a tumor.
I would go to the doctor.
Go to your doctor
Someone
and get
said
it
it was
ruled
a-
out.
Yeah.
just in
Someone in the
case.
chat said it was a tumor.
I don't think it's a tumor, but definitely you should have, your sleeping evaluated and make sure that is, everything's okay there. But, all things are possible. And if you've ever heard anything about transcendentalism, maybe you could look into that. I kind of think that, it's interesting that we can all share kind of a common thread, and maybe that's kind of where that comes from.
Let me tell you a cool story. Michelle?
Reba Michelle.
Yeah, listen to this. I'll make it short. One of my favorite stories ever. A woman moves into an old farmhouse. When she walks in, she's taking her boxes in and she's putting them down in the front room. She looks up on the stairwell, and on the stairwell, at the top of the stairwell, at the landing, is a beautiful young woman dancing. Full color, non-transparent, this beautiful young woman dancing, but with no sound. And she's taken aback. Who is this young woman? She calls out to her, but she doesn't answer back. All right, then she disappears before her very eyes. All right, this happens over and over. She keeps seeing this woman in the house. And then finally she starts doing the research on the home to find out who lived there last. And it was it was one family who had built it and owned it. And the woman, the husband had died years ago, and the woman was in a nursing home. She went to see the woman in the nursing home. The woman was asleep in the bed when she went into the room, and on the walls were images of her as a young woman, and there was the woman that she was seeing dancing on the landing. And so ultimately, while this little old woman was asleep in her bed in the nursing home miles down the road, she was in her dreams going back to where she was happy. And this woman was seeing her on the landing dancing as a very living person. So the capabilities, the possibilities are always there.
Is that like a symptom of residual injury as well?
Residual is after something passes, so no.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, in a sense, if there was enough energy left behind from from something that was so good or something so bad that a person doesn't actually have to be dead to leave it behind, then possibly.
But if you also have PK, is that very troublesome for the individual as well?
What is PK? Night terrors?
No, it's poltergeist activity.
Poltergeist activity is an entirely different thing altogether. Poltergeist activity is generally brought on by pure emotion, generally in teenagers, but it can be other people. But the human mind and the emotions of the living generally create the animation of objects flying around the rooms. We've had things like that happen as well.
But night terrors are a real medical issue, so I definitely would do a sleep study like we've suggested and just see what's going on.
Would also past life regression, would that help at all, or you just see a doctor?
Do the doctor first.
Okay.
Yeah,
Always,
definitely do.
always, no matter what, medical doctor before the priest, before the shaman, before the medical doctor. When everything else is ruled out, then go to the next step.
Now, did you say, I just picked up, did you say that that poltergeist activity can be generated by living people?
Absolutely.
I've not heard
Absolutely.
Teenagers usually.
Teenagers.
Yeah.
No,
Well, that
that's-
figures.
I would believe that if you're talking about pure emotion, pure energy, no one has that more than teenagers.
Teenagers are the catalyst for the most poltergeist activity. A living teen in a home is generally the common denominator of the most poltergeist in a home.
Really?
That was some of the theory for the Bell Witch.
Really?
Oh, absolutely.
Interesting.
Can this kill people though?
Can it what?
Can it kill someone?
No, I absolutely wouldn't go there, that poltergeist activity. I really wouldn't go there.
Oh, okay.
Reba Michelle, thank you so much. I remember
We
you from my
appreciate it.
live feed.
Awesome.
I appreciate you.
Thanks,
It's really
guys.
nice to hear from you.
Awesome. Bye, guys.
Bye. All right. Oh, wow.
it's ringing again.
Okay, already.
Um,
And we've got 2 calls at the same time.
hello?
They're not answered. You have to hit the green button.
Hello?
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 You've not got it on speaker. That's why.
Oh, sorry. Hello, do we have someone on the line?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Who are we talking with?
You got the pirate Rip here. Ah.
The pirate. Hi, how are you?
Oh, not too bad.
Thanks for calling in. What was your question?
My question is Greg, do you have any knowledge of dream catchers? I had one once made by the Mohawks where I live up here in New York. And for so many nights, I didn't dream or anything because I had the dream catcher up by my head on the wall. And then one night I started having vivid nightmares that really shook me up. And then once I got rid of the dream catcher, it all went away.
I thought that's the opposite of how they're supposed to work.
Yeah, it seems like it. A bad dream catcher.
What I would say is that dream catchers go back for a long time in a lot of different tribes. And my take on it is that every single thing that has existed for a long time had a catalyst of purpose. And so I would never say that a dream catcher can or cannot do something, or it wouldn't be a part of a culture, multiple cultures. But I truly don't know more than that. I don't disregard or put the stamp of approval on. I just know that they go back for so long in different cultures that I believe that they had a purpose, and maybe the dream catcher that you had was acting as a catalyst for the good or the bad of the dreams you were having. Very, very possible.
All right.
Okay.
Does that answer your question, Pirate? Kind of?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Thank you so much for calling in.
Okay, thank you guys so much. I love you, Jake.
Appreciate it.
Thank
Thank you.
you. Bye-bye. All right. Oh, here we go. Hi, Denver, Colorado. Who's calling?
Hello.
Hello?
Hello.
You're
Hi.
live.
This is William Martin. Hi, Carpetbaggers. Hi, Greg. Hey, guys.
Hey, how are you?
Hi,
What's up?
William. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. You mentioned a spirit box earlier, and I own one.
Uh-huh.
I own an SB7 spirit box.
Uh-huh.
What wavelength do you set yours at?
I will to tell you the truth, I generally use AM just because the FM is so darn loud and annoying. However,
a spirit box can truly be like mind-numbing to just.
it can be. However, I believe that you get better messages out of the FM, but the AM is so much more pleasant. And I generally, the times that I've used it, the slower the better, even though that's going to pull in more of the radio crosstalk. You're going to hear more of the DJ. You're going to hear more of the Celine Dion song. You're going to hear more of this or that. But I prefer to be able to have a casual listening environment so that I can hear what's coming through. I prefer.
And like, I've heard my mother's voice go through it, and I've also heard my mother's voice go through my bare ears. And she's been dead since 2002 at the age of 42, and I was 17 at the time. So, have you ever experienced something like that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Multiple times. I've got multiple stories. If we're going to talk about voices, just the most recent voice that I heard was this year, and that was my wife's father passed away 1 week after her mother.
Oh.
And when we went to their home, we pulled up into the driveway, got out of the car, walked toward the door, and could audibly hear my wife's father calling to us from inside the house. Could hear his voice calling. Of course, he wasn't inside when we got in there. He wasn't in there. Goes without saying, he was gone. But absolutely, we can hear the voices from those who have gone before us. Absolutely. And on the spirit box, I was doing an investigation on a Woodlawn cemetery tour down here in the mountains about 2 years ago. And we were actually at the grave of George W. Meek, we talked about earlier, the father of the man who invented all these devices. And we had about 10 people gathered around his tombstone, had the spirit box up on top of it. And one of the young ladies says, "What is your name?" And as plain as I'm speaking to you, he, through the radio static stopped, and the voice comes through and he says, "Meek." And so
Wow.
absolutely, you can hear things through those devices and with your own ears. Absolutely. Never.
Yeah. The reason why I got SB7 Spirit Box is because I'm a fan and a follower of the Ghost Adventures crew from Las Vegas, Nevada, and their show on the Travel Channel. And I love paranormal research. I'm into the paranormal. I'm a pagan, and it makes me feel so happy when I do that stuff. Makes me feel so connected to everything.
That's awesome, William, and I'm so glad that you get to do what you love. Thank you so much for calling in.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. I love you guys.
Appreciate
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. Any more calls? We'll take one more. Sometimes it's like this, and sometimes they overrun, too. Is anybody else planning on calling?
I don't know.
What's your opinion on, like, animal forms? I've always heard that cardinals represented the dead, blackbirds represent harbingers of death. Tell me about that, because my grandmother passed away, and I've been seeing cardinals in my trees down there right outside my bedroom window, and I often think about that.
That goes along with the dream catchers, the rituals of old. It goes back thousands of years, and if hundreds and hundreds of years worth of people believed that certain animals symbolize certain things, I got no problem.
That's okay, don't worry.
Same.
Absolutely.
All right, who do we have on the line?
It's John.
Hey, John, how are you doing? Peddling Prince.
I'm not doing too badly.
Aha, Peddling Prince. How are you?
Not too bad.
This is our Nova Scotian
Greg,
Prince who
all right.
calls. Yep. What's your question?
Well, Greg, I wanted to get your opinion on those kind of spirit boxes. You know, the kind that actually say words when to try to translate what a ghost is saying. Particularly, I'd like to get your opinion on the ones that are like apps on a phone. There's a reason I'm asking about this, because I've told the Jacob and Christy the story, but I'm wondering if you think those have any validity.
All right, I've got a story for you.
No. What I mean is, like, do you think that those kind of the reason I ask is because a cell phone is obviously not something that has like dedicated sensors for electromagnetic activity or that kind of thing. Do you think those apps though actually have any actual valid use?
My wife's going to take over for a second. I got to go to the bathroom.
Absolutely.
Or you guys talk for just a second. I'll be right back.
Okay.
I can answer this question.
We will answer the question, but
Bathroom break.
bathroom break.
Sorry.
I wondered that too, because I've done, I've if people watch the channel, I don't really do paranormal activities, but I'm sometimes exploring at the same time.
Oh no, I'm sorry. Oh, and he runs into our door. It's because my door is so clean.
I didn't know our door was
It's
clean.
not clean. It's not clean. It's just dark.
Yeah, I've wondered that
Plus it's
myself. I've been done urban exploring while there was other paranormal people doing paranormal activities, and some of them do use apps on their phone. I know there was one app some guy was using that it plays the Lord's Prayer backwards, like,
oh my gosh.
and then like picks up sounds. I don't know. I'm certainly not an expert in that.
You know, the reason I wonder about this is, like, I'm wondering, like, how in the holy hell would a ghost figure out how to use such a device to begin with? Like, that's one of the reasons I asked Greg what he thinks, you know.
I don't know. I mean, you know, they figure out how to use other devices, and they may be hundreds of years old, right? Many
That's
of them.
true, and theoretically, I think it's probably possible, because if ghosts are in fact electromagnetic energy, then they are going to impact electronic devices. So the theory is sound, but I'm trying to figure out how the heck such a thing would actually work.
So I think the story Greg was going to tell you about the cell phone app is we had an outside spigot that was left on, and I left it on, and it flooded. Not a deep flood, but it was a mess to clean up. And so I didn't remember doing that. And we had our daughter-in-law at the time who was over babysitting, and she and my younger son were playing around with the ghost app on the phone. And they were asking, because it was this mystery of why the spigot was left on and the basement had gotten flooded. And they asked that question. We weren't home, and the ghost app said Paula, and my name's Pauletta, and so it kind of told on me. And then I remembered that yes, indeed, I had left it on because I'd been washing out some trash cans on the outside.
What a freaking
And so
marked ghost.
I know, and it told on me.
I know.
So I think
Okay.
that was the story he was going to tell you. So it did have some validity to it.
Oh my
Well, you know,
gosh.
the reason I asked is the story I have is it's actually pretty simple. I was at work. I was writing an email, and I had this thing running next to me just for something, you know, ambient noise, whatever. And while I was writing the email, I pressed enter to start a new paragraph. The instant I did that, the thing went paragraph.
Oh.
And I looked over at it, I'm like, what the? That
Prince,
made
that's what my
hair
iPhone
stand
on a
up.
daily basis. It just like figures out everything I'm going to do before I do it.
Hey, yeah, what? There's something up with iPhones. Like, have you ever, I guess this isn't ghost talk, but more like conspiracy talk. You ever been like talking about something, and then your phone like sends you an advertisement for something that you never like officially put into Siri or never typed out?
I personally have not, but I've spoken to a number of people that have said that exact thing.
I forget the
And,
example,
like,
but there was one time
I wonder.
I had the phone on the table, and I was talking about something, and I like picked it on, unlocked it, and
Oh, are you okay?
Comic value, I literally busted my nose on the door.
Oh my God.
No, not comic.
You're
I'm
welcome.
sorry.
No, that is comic. From where I come from, this is called funny.
so apparently,
I'm so sorry.
while going in our front door, we have a glass outer door, and apparently,
You did?
it's okay if we okay.
Poor Greg.
Greg
Victim of my
unfortunately
door.
walked into the door.
Ugh.
Crystal
Yeah, I
clear.
know how that feels. I was in one of those glass maze deals that
Dear
Jacob was
God.
in recently, and yeah,
Crystal
I
clear
walked
door.
into one. There's
The
one
light
that's
beyond
full of
looked
kids
just like I was
pictures, the one
walking
that
into the
you
room.
saw, or like, boom. It's like, that really hurt.
Sorry.
But anyway, Greg,
That's
I think your wife there said that she knew what story. Ooh, you okay? I'm just looking at the video and see you're holding your nose.
That's all right.
It's not broken, is it?
If my son's watching, he's loving this.
nice. Is it broken? Are you
No,
okay?
I'm fine. No, it
Okay.
just nailed me.
Gosh.
I nailed it.
Okay, no, I had the audio off, so I wasn't looking at the video, and I look over and she's holding his nose like, okay.
Yeah, she had told the story of the ghost narking her out for leaving the water spigot on.
Oh yeah, good story.
Yeah. Prince, thanks for calling.
Yes, thank you for
so
calling.
much.
Yeah, but Greg, just right quick, I want to tell you the story that I told them. It's very simple. I was at work, and I had one of those ghost box things on my phone running. And while I was writing an email, I pressed enter to start a new paragraph, and the instant I do that, the thing goes paragraph. I'm like looking over it, like, okay, are you watching me? What the hell? But that's why I wondered if you thought there was any validity to these
I really, oddly enough, I think there is. Oddly enough, I believe there is.
And I have to wonder why that ghost was watching you right. How about you?
You're an interesting fellow, maybe. I don't know.
Thank you, John.
That was my main question, because I often wondered about those things. So I appreciate that, man.
Thank you. It's so good to talk to you again.
Yeah, I'll be back. But in the meantime, you guys have a good show. Have a good night, man.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
For some reason, the phone answered itself.
Okay, that's creepy. So people in the comments are saying that Kari made you run into the door.
Did give you a little push?
Yeah, gave you a little push.
Maybe so.
She's playing with you.
So is that the bridge of your nose that you caught right there?
Yeah. Oh, bless
I'm good.
his heart.
It's a good. No, I live for
We've
a good
killed
story.
Greg.
I live for a good story. That's a good story.
We've killed Greg, guys. We invite somebody over, and this is the best we can do. Or they say it's maybe the Annabelle poltergeist inside my daughter.
Annabelle poltergeist. Oh yeah. If anyone could create a poltergeist, it would be Annabelle.
Yes. Reba just recognized that I'm wearing a Hocus Pocus t-shirt. Yes, I got this today. I'm so excited.
Mason,
you just love Greg, don't you? He just wants to
cover you in orange hair
and cat booty. It's okay to just knock him down.
Okay, now people are blaming Robert the Doll.
Robert the Doll. We do have a Robert the Doll in the basement. It's only a likeness. We didn't steal the real thing. But have you been to Key West?
No, but that's the main thing I want to see in Key West is Robert the Doll.
You
ever heard the story of Count Coswell?
Is he the one who kept the wife alive?
Yes. He's made the human doll out of his.
Absolutely.
Oh, look at him. He's just making himself at home. I hope you like cats. Sorry.
It's all right.
All right, guys. Well, we've had a wonderful night with some great, great stories. I want y'all to remember whereshadowswalk.com. Book Ghost Country. Everybody needs to pick up a copy of this. 3 Days in 63 is coming out in the spring. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Spring of 2019. I'm sure if you... Do you think Amazon would have a pre-sale on that where you could put it in your cart first?
We will.
They will?
We will.
Not yet, but they will.
And it'll be on our website.
So, and also
And
on
then we'll
the
have
website.
the teen campfire book, Whispers in the Night. We'll have Ghost Country Volume 2, and a lot of fun stuff coming your way.
And if someone wants to go on a tour, where do they?
If they want to go on a tour, just go to whereshadowswalk.com and come on down to the Great Smoky Mountains and take us up on a tour. We got more stories that I could stay up for 3 nights in a row and never ever finish all the stories.
And get out there, guys. You got to get out of the box of going to the same old places in Gatlinburg and Pigeon Forge and Asheville, and get out here in Western North Carolina and really enjoy what this rich culture is. I promise you won't regret it. It will be a great trip. So, all right. Well, everybody, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And good night. We'll see you later.
All right, this one's
in the bag.
In the bag.